On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Welcome back, everyone. As mentioned at the outset of the show, today's all about trying to reduce your risk and prepare yourselves as best possible for the future when things start to re-emerge across the international trade and supply chain sectors here in Australia. So joining us now is Quinton McCauley from Network Insurance Group. Hi Quinton, how are you?
Good, Lawrence. How are you?
Great, mate. Thanks for joining us up in sunny Sydney.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Quinton, just before we kick off, I want to ask you to tell the audience about Network Insurance Group and Steadfast and what you guys offer.
Yeah, for sure. So Network Insurance Group we're a national insurance broker. We have 135 odd staff across Australia, mainly in Sydney and Melbourne, and we're majority owned by Steadfast Group, which is Australia's largest broker network. Our point of difference is really we take a customised program as opposed to just a product that gets sold. It's a live program that can be restructured at any time, and it's important to do that as business profiles change.
Absolutely, and that's, I want to say we're really proud from the Australian Trade and Logistics Corporation to have Network Insurance Group as one of our national partners, because it's moments like these where you guys, really shine and come into your own, because the insurance is for the what if scenario, and you hope it never happens, but as we're experiencing now, it actually is right across so many areas. And that's what I wanted to open up with, Quinton, is what are you experiencing? What have been the increased business risks that have emerged over the last couple of months?
COVID-19 has been interesting. After a season of huge bushfires in Australia have an obvious impact on insurance, it was one of those things that the impact wasn't immediately obvious. The obvious ones that corporate travel insurance, generally that will actually cover claims in connection with pandemics. What's really emerged, the impact on trade credit insurance,
of course,
which I know we've had conversations with that ATLC members in the past, and IMF said last night something to the effect of that we'll definitely be heading towards a depression. The outlook right now is positive, but next quarter we're expecting a slowdown.
And even things, Quinton, like cyber risk. I mean, obviously everyone's gone online now, and because of that, there's an increased threat, a vulnerability, if you like, across every business now. And that cyber risk, I know you guys, I was blown away last year with one of your presentations around how, you've got policies for companies around cyber risk. That's a really current and really timely discussion as well.
Absolutely, and this has been something we've been talking to clients about for the last couple of years. Look, cyber risk is the fastest growing risk in Australia from an insurance perspective, and that's reflected in the growing frequency and size of claims that we get coming through. Australia is perceived to be easier to attack. Australian businesses don't often have the same level of security infrastructure. Now with the move to working from home, businesses are discovering that they're probably more resilient than they thought they might be, and that they can actually move to a work from home arrangement. The downside is this massive reliance now on remote networks. If your network goes down and everyone's working from home, or you've got half the office working remotely, the impact on that's massive. Cyber insurance covers your not just your loss of data restoration costs, but also your business interruption. Implications could be pretty catastrophic. There's increased risk because you've got employees working from home Wi-Fi networks. If they're in the office, IT managers can control the security of networks and protocols. But at home, you've got generally your home password. Hackers can access your network through that. I couldn't recommend it enough. Get cyber insurance if you don't have it already. Not having it could, in our view, it's the equivalent of not having property insurance in place.
I mean, if you look at what we talked about already, the non-payment risk, the cyber risk, and then we look at the physical side of things as well. So companies, because they're working from home, I've heard on the radio that there's increased break-ins with factories and offices because they're unoccupied, right? So then you've got stock levels, people's stock levels have changed dramatically, or they're stocking up, they're stockpiling stock because no one's open to actually send this stuff around. So are you experiencing those type of claims as well?
They're starting to come through. Unoccupied premises is really critical. And one point a lot of people don't realise, when you arrange property insurance, all insurance policies have a clause where if it's unoccupied for more than a certain amount of time, and that could be 30 or 60 days generally, then the insurer will actually exclude claim malicious damage, fire, and in some cases, depending on the policy wording, they'll completely exclude any property damage claims if you haven't disclosed that it's unoccupied. So that's probably the number one thing that I would say businesses should be aware of.
Wow.
Talk to your insurance broker. If you don't have one, or you don't have that sort of relationship, talk to us. We can review your program for you, and we don't charge for it for ATLC members. Risk management is really important for vacant properties. Make sure that you shut off utilities unless you've got alarms and sprinklers dependent on them. The one thing I would say to every business owner out there is don't assume that your insurance program is adequate and that it reflects the changing risk of your business. Make sure you take the time to review it, because we've had clients, or they're paying for something that they can't claim on because they've got twice the level of stock and stock levels have reduced. And the same goes for transit insurance.
People have to really rethink what their profile is all about and their business models across their inventory supply chain. The other really valuable piece of advice that I know you've mentioned to me off air, Quinton, is the actual director's liability and that personal exposure now.
Absolutely. And look, the economic response package included a moratorium on insolvencies. If you're a business owner, covering yourself as a director, because you do hold personal liability for decisions you make in running of the business. And the other thing, which is probably more of a longer tail exposure, is going to be occupational health and safety around employee wellbeing, mental health, and that sort of thing.
So let's say we've got all these people working from home, right? What's the employer's liability if they fall over in the bathroom at home? No one's really thinking this stuff through or being prepared for it.
Really good question. A couple of points to this. And one is, wherever your employee is working is deemed to be a place of work. Workers' compensation will cover employees injured at home, loss of income, medical expenses, liability. And that's the employer's statutory obligation to make sure that occupational health and safety issues are addressed and that the employee has a safe place of work. Again, going back to that management liability insurance, covering your personal liability as a director, covering employment practices claims around redundancies and that sort of thing, and then also covering fines and penalties. And every management liability insurance policies generally will cover all three of those things. And it's absolutely critical to have those in place. The other thing is every employee should be completing a basic checklist to make sure that they've signed off that their workplace is safe.
So making sure that the employees understand what their requirements are and obligations are to create a safe working environment while they are at home, and how you as an employer can support them to make sure they get that right to cover yourself as well. So I really want to encourage everyone to join this webinar next week, 12 p.m, 23rd. I think we've got a slide that we can put up on screen in a minute, but that's it. It's a free webinar. You've got nothing to lose, but you can hear already there are so many unknowns that people haven't prepared themselves for. Quinton, just before we wrap up, this is also about making sure your business, as you said, once the moratorium ends with some of the liabilities and management things, if people haven't got their stuff together now, once things do turn back on, they can be more exposed and their businesses change dramatically. So that's why they need to rethink and relook at all their policies and contracts with you as well.
Yeah, I couldn't emphasise that enough. Insurance is a grudge purchase in a lot of respects, and I think it's important to look at it as balance sheet protection and start shifting the focus from covering those small working losses, maybe look at taking higher excesses, and making sure that you've got the critical cover that you do need, like cyber insurance. So we'll talk a bit more about that next week.
Really looking forward to next week's webinar. We've already had an influx of registrations. We haven't even marketed it yet. So today's the first marketing kickoff with that. again, real pleasure to have you on the show. Look forward to next week, and we'll get you on a regular basis with all this, how it evolves as well. So get in touch if you need to speak to Quinton. Obviously the webinar next week, but reach out. We'll have the details on our upcoming post as well with Quinton's details for Network Insurance Group.